Well, welcome to another AOCS webinar. I'm so glad you could join us. I'm Amy Guerin, the Director of Brand and Digital Strategy with AOCS. Today we have the Technical Director of AOCS, Scott Bloomer, back again for the second in his series of 3 webinars to discuss patent. We will have a 4th patent-related webinar that will be presented by representatives from Mindsoft. So there are actually a total of 4 webinars in the total series. If you are interested in any of those webinars that we have remaining, please visit aocs.org/webinar, and I will drop some links in the chat in a moment. So our presenter today, as I said, is Scott Bloomer, and he is a registered U.S. patent agent and understands patents from both the inventor's scientific perspective and the legal perspective, and he can help you interpret between those. He does continue to do a patent-related column in Inform magazine and has done so for 17 years. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Scott.
Thank you, Amy. So here we are. Today we're going to talk about claims. It's a complicated and difficult topic, and it gets a little hairy in the middle. So if you can hang in there, you will learn a lot. So here's what we're going to talk about today. First, the introductory remarks, and then I'll talk about the parts of a patent, so you get a little introduction to that, and then the parts of the claim. We talked a little bit about that last week, and then claim analysis and identification of the important claim terms, and then finding the claim term meanings, and then we'll put it all together and see what we come up with. I want to emphasize that I'm not an attorney, so this presentation does not contain anything that should be construed as legal advice. So here we have our explorer, our inventor, our scientist, our seeker after knowledge, and they have left the town where they were educated back here, and they have passed by asking more and more difficult questions that fewer and fewer people had the answer to the boundary here between what's known and what's unknown. And they are seeing things that nobody knows. So they're going to take that knowledge back to the town and either write a paper or file a patent application. So that's what we're talking about here, is a key step in the process of innovation. So when you look at a patent, I like to divide it into 3 parts. There's the front page, which is also called front matter. And then there's the rest, this big long section called the specification. And we talked about many different parts of the specification last time. And then at the end, there's a little section called the claims. And the claims are the reason for everything else existing. Everything that's written before that is there to support and strengthen and defend those claims. So on the front page, we have a lot of metadata, the title, the inventors, the assignee, priority data, and related applications. Now, the date that a patent application is filed is a very important date, and it's called the priority date, because that's the date before which something could be prior art, and after which is less likely to be prior art. And that could be a provisional patent application, which is a type of patent application that you can file quickly and cheaply to get a place in the queue. And it does start the clock ticking for your publication date. Another field following that is the patent classification. And then we'll have a section about searching and references, and then comes the abstract. So here we see a little representation of a patent for a crock. So this is a patent we're going to look at today. This is US Patent 7967986B2. We know that the B tells us that it's a granted patent, And we see the date of the patent below that was June 28th, 2011. So here we see the title, Process for Absorption-Based Separation of Bioparticles from an Aqueous Suspension. Good title. Below that we see the inventors listed. Bo Mathiasson was my professor when I did my PhD, and Igor Galiev was in the same lab with me for a couple of years. We worked together, became good friends. And you see that in the US patents, the city and the country in which they live is listed. So Bo lives in Europe, Igor lives in Lund, and SE means Sweden. Now, if you work in research, the first day when you started, you probably had to sign some sort of document. And the document was an assignment document. And the assignment document said, anything that I invent that's related to my job while I'm working at this company, the patent rights belong to the company. So you assigned your rights to the company. So the person to whom the rights are assigned are called the assignee or the assignee. And here we see that it's Protista Biotechnology AB in Bjuv, Sweden. This box here is of interest to somebody who wants to know the chain of applications, because often a patent application is filed and then it's filed in another country and it's filed maybe in the World Patent Office, and then it comes back into the countries it was filed in earlier. It's a long and convoluted process, but the most important thing here is to look at the very bottom where you see this date here, May 13th, 2005, Sweden. That would be the priority date for this patent. So anything that came before that could be considered prior art by the patent office, but anything after that would not be likely to be considered. Following that, there's a section called patent classification and search. So we're all familiar with keyword searches. Well, the patent office has a number of boxes. So when a patent application comes in, they say, okay, it belongs in this box, and it also belongs in that box, and it's related to that box. And then they put all the box numbers here so that the US has a system, Europe has a system, the PCT, which is the World Patent Cooperation Treaty, the World Patent Office has a system. And you can find a lot of information by learning to search on these codes. Just ask Mr. Google how to do it. Following that, we see this small section where we see the references cited, and there are two types. There's the kind that has an asterisk and the kind that does not. So the kind that does not would be documents that were cited by the patent applicant or in prosecution. And the ones with the asterisk were cited by the patent examiner because they'll do a search on your claims. And of course, we have an abstract, which we will look at somewhat later. Now, by way of review, you will recall perhaps that the specification is broken into these pieces, a background, which kind of gives you the feel or the area that the technology is concerned with, a brief summary, which is supposed to be very clear and not legalese and talks about this particular patent and what the invention is supposed to be, description of the drawings, which may be missing, and then finally the detailed description. The detailed description is where you look if you want to find out what they actually did. So here's where you'll find examples, and you'll find the explanation of what was done. Not in a nice, neat format like a scientific paper, but everything's a little bit jumbled together. So now we see, looking at the patent itself, the issued patent, that it has the number at the top and it has the title at the top of the one column. US patents are broken into two columns like this, and the lines are all numbered. And here we see that there's a section about the related applications that talks about the history of the application, which is of interest to a patent agent or a patent attorney. And then we have the technical field, and then we have a section called the background art. So this is a little different from what we talked about last week, but why be normal? Looking onward, we see the next one, that the next section is called description of the invention. This again is an aberration from what we talked about last week, but it just serves to illustrate that people don't follow the rules when they're drafting patents. And now we're over into the examples section, and you see that we have preparatory examples, we have real examples, we might have examples called comparative examples, and if you really want to know what they did to make something happen, you look in the examples. It's the guideline for the person that is completely unfamiliar with patents. So that's a very brief overview. The section following that is called the claims, and that's what we're going to focus on here today. And the claims are like the title deed to a piece of land. So here's the boundaries. Everything inside is mine, everything outside is not mine. And there are 3 different types of claims we're going to talk about today: the composition of matter, the process or method, and the product by process claims. And once you learn to divide the claims into those 3 types, it becomes much easier to understand them. We also have the concept of independent and dependent claims. So an independent claim is a claim that stands by itself. So that could be a process of making a composition comprising mixing A, B, and C and heating. So that would be an independent claim. But then a dependent claim would come after that, and it would say the process of claim 1, wherein the process is carried out between 120 degrees Celsius and 150 degrees Celsius. So it took the A, B, and C and heat, and it added to it a limitation on the temperature. So that's a dependent claim, and you can easily identify a dependent claim because it refers back to an earlier claim. And some of them refer back to more than one earlier claim. It's just a dependent claim. So now I want to look very closely at the parts of a claim. So a claim has 3 parts. There's a part called the preamble, the transitional phrase, and then the list of elements. And these are statutory groups. This is what the patent offices of the world dictate is the way it should be done. And they're a lot more twitchy about the claims than they are about the specification. So there are 3 types, these 3 pieces of a claim always occur in this sequence. And when it comes to these pieces, there are very limited choices. So that makes it easier. So when you look at the preamble, there are 3 major types of preambles. One is called a composition. So that would be a composition comprising a mixture of A, B, and C. That's the most desirable because anybody that gets to a mixture of A, B, and C by any means at all could be infringing a valid claim of this patent. So that's the strongest type of claim is always a composition claim. Following that, there's a kind called a method or process claim, which would be a method for making a pudding, or a method of making a catalyst, or a process for removing impurities from fusel oil. It talks about the steps that are going to follow. Then there's a third type that we don't see very often. We try to avoid it. It's called a product by process claim, a product obtained by a process. And the reason people don't like it is because it's kind of limited compared to the other 2. So generally speaking, if you can just look at a claim and see, is it a composition or is it a method, you're halfway to understanding the claim preamble. Following the preamble, we have one of 3 transitional phrases. And this is a really important concept, okay? Because you're going to have your preamble, and then it's going to say comprising, or it's going to say consisting of, or it's going to say consisting essentially of. Those are your choices, A, B, or C. You don't get more than one. So the best transitional phrase to use is comprising because it's an open-ended term. It's kind of like including or containing or characterized by. So it means this and anything else I can stick onto it. That's a comprising term. Now, consisting of is the opposite. It means this and no more. The other term, consisting essentially of, is a gray area term, and people avoid it because it means it's the same. It's the same as what I've listed here, but you can add little things to it that that don't materially affect the invention. And it's just a recipe for a lawsuit, in my opinion. But sometimes people will accept it because it's the only thing they can get. So this next slide illustrates the difference between comprising and consisting of. So we have here two stools, okay? And so we have three claims, and the first claim and the second claim are to be compared to the third claim, okay? So let me elaborate. So the first claim is a resting device, which is the stool, comprising a platform and 3 support members. Okay, so that's a really nice little claim, a resting device comprising a platform and 3 support members. So now somebody comes along and they file a patent application. And the patent application is for a patent with 4 legs. And so their claim is a resting device comprising a platform and 4 support members. Now, the person that has the top claim, which says comprising, will prevent the second applicant from actually getting this claim allowed at the patent office, because the device with 3 legs means 3 legs and a back, 3 legs and a 4th leg, 3 legs and arms. So that is very important. Now, if the person had only gotten a claim at the bottom called a resting device consisting of a platform and 3 support members, the field would have been wide open for somebody to come along and get a patent claim that says a resting device comprising a platform and 4 support members. So consisting of is very limited. It means this much and no more. Comprising is very open and very powerful. So that's why you want to distinguish between them when you're looking at the claims. And then we talked about the list of the elements. That's basically the rest of the claim. Each element limits the preamble, and so you could have conditions like temperature, pressure, a ramp of some sort, or a temperature ramp, and then you have the different pieces that you put in there. So the word element used in patents doesn't refer to a chemical element like we would find on the periodic table. It refers to a different piece, a building block in the claim that follows the transitional phrase. So here's an example. This is from the Nishin-Oilio group, and we see here a method for producing chocolate. Okay, so it's a method claim, right? It's a method for producing chocolate. And then we see the transitional phrase, which is comprising. And then we see a list of elements. And so first of all, the first element is an addition step of adding a seeding agent. The second element is a holding step of holding the temperature of the chocolate. The third element is a viscosity parameter, so that the viscosity of the mixture hits a certain range. And then the fourth element is a composition. It's an element where the chocolate mix contains a certain amount of a triglyceride, 1,3-diastereoyl 2-oil-glycerol in the mixture. So here we have those 4 elements, and they limit the method for producing chocolate. So now we're going to talk about claim analysis, okay? Claims are often a bit of a headache for people when they're not used to them, and there's a good reason for that. This is an attorney that wrote, claims are written in a very legalistic and stilted way. And here, this is very important. The claims don't necessarily mean exactly what they say. There's this whole analysis that a person goes through to look at the drawings and the specification, and to look at what went on in the patent office, because if the patent office says, no, you can't have a patent because you're talking about this particular thing, and I say, well, no, but when I use the word that refers to this particular thing, it doesn't mean the same as what that other person that has a patent meant. That now becomes a limitation on what your patent terms mean, but you don't know that unless you look at the record of what happened between the examiner and the applicant's attorney, which is called the prosecution history. And then we have the doctrine of equivalence, which is kind of like that shady claim structure we talked about before. And so this is kind of a real encouraging reference here. Claim interpretation is an arcane art, a mysterious art, best left to patent attorneys after a long analysis. And I've done many of these analyses and turned them over to patent attorneys for their approval, and they are long. So now let's look back at the patent that we were looking at before, this separation patent. So this is the claim set. It's very little. It's only 6 claims. So this is pretty good. So let's see what kind of claim types we have, okay? Do we have independent claims? Okay, well, we see here that the first claim, of course, is an independent claim, and it talks about the process, and then each claim following refers back to claim 1 or claim 1 or claim 2. So we have 5 dependent claims, each of which adds a set of limitations to claim 1. So now let's look at claim 1. So claim 1, which by the way is almost identical to the abstract. Process for adsorption-based separation of bioparticles from an aqueous suspension containing such bioparticles. Such bioparticles means those bioparticles we just mentioned. They will also use the word said bioparticles, which also means the bioparticles that we just talked about. So when you see the word such and said at the end of a sentence, it's talking about the ones they were referring to earlier in the sentence or earlier in the paragraph. Which process comprises, here's an element, bringing said aqueous suspension into contact with a macroporous cryogel monolith, carrying on its surface a ligand capable of interacting specifically or non-specifically, the receptor on the surface of a bioparticle to be separated to adsorb said bioparticle to said macroporous cryogel monolith. And second element, liberating said bioparticle from said macroporous cryogel monolith by elution, wherein said macroporous cryogel monolith is subjected to a physical deformation in conjunction with exposure to eluting medium. Okay, so what are they doing here? So we have an aqueous suspension that has bioparticles in it, okay? And then we have a thing called a macroporous cryogel monolith with little handles, ligands. And the handles on the cryogel monolith will match the handles on the bioparticles. And so you pass the mixture through and the bioparticles adsorb to the cryogel monolith. And then after you've passed the whole mess through, then you pass an eluting solution through, and somehow in that eluting process, you subject the cryogel monolith to deformation. It's a lot simpler than it sounds. So what type of claim do we have? Do we have a composition, a method process, or a product by process? It's right there. It's a process claim. Easy. So what about our transitional phrase? Well, look at right there. It's bolded for us. It's comprises. So that's the good transitional phrase that we want to see. Okay, now after you figured out what kind of claim it is and what the transitional phrase is, you set the stage to do the real work. And this is where you have to do some digging. So the first thing you do is you look and you identify the important claim terms. Now, this was easy for me because I've done it a lot. And you might have to kind of struggle with it. And you, in the beginning, when you're doing this, you might end up identifying 9 terms that you think are important. And that's okay because it comes with practice. So I've bolded them here and listed them here. So these are the important claim terms. Adsorption-based separation. I think I know what that means. Okay. Cryogel monolith. I have no idea what that means. Physical deformation. In this context, that's really baffling to me. I don't know what that means. So now I think I know what the adsorption-based separation means. So my job is to confirm that the specification actually says that. And it actually defines it the same way as I think it. That's the trap that we have with patents, that we think that we know what something means, but it doesn't. So here's a little break slide. And I'm sure we all have good imaginations if we're faced with the right pile of junk. Now let's look at the section on finding the claim terms. This is hard work, okay? So if you start to get bored, try to stay awake. So the first thing you do is you look in the specification for explanation of the terms. So you can just punch in adsorption-based separation and let your browser click through it and look for something like what is meant by, or adsorption-based separation means, or is there an explanation around it that talks about it? And the same thing with the cryogel monolith, and the same thing with physical deformation. And so you go through this because of this trap I talked about. You think you know what the word means, but it's a trap. And they will trap you. So I looked in the specification to see if those terms were clearly defined. And so adsorption-based separation is not, cryogel monolith is not, but physical deformation is. So we're 1/3 of the way there. Okay, so now when you want to find a claim meaning, there is a certain hierarchy of steps that you go through to get the claim term meaning. And these are actually, this is the way the patent trials do this. They have a thing called a Markman hearing where a judge will determine this word means this. And after that, that's what it means. So the first question is, can we just look in the specification? The second is, well, if it doesn't clearly say in the specification, what would somebody who is versed in the art, a person having ordinary skill in the art, say this means? And if that doesn't work, what's the broadest ordinary meaning? And then if that doesn't work, you look in the dictionary. And I just put this in here because it's really cool. So what does the specification say about adsorption-based separation? We've already established that it's not clearly defined, but I think I know what it means. And so when I looked in the dictionary, because I couldn't define it from the from the specification, and I have a lot of biochemistry training, and I think I know what it means. Based on that training, I would be a person having ordinary skill in the art, and my meaning would probably be correct. But here's what I found in a dictionary. Interactions between bioparticles, adsorption of cells, affinity-based separations with polyvalent nature. There's a lot of little handles. That's kind of what I thought it meant. And let's look at adsorption. Well, that's when something sticks to another thing in really thin layer. And so I would say, yes, this term, as used in the patent, is the common meaning, and so we understand it. Now, this is the tough one, the cryogel monolith. I really had to work to find this one. So it says, unlike traditional gels, these are elastic, soft, sponge-like materials, okay? And the monoliths keep liquid inside them and are drainage protected. The monoliths, okay? And so then I said, well, monolith, obviously I need to know what a monolith is. A very large stone that is usually tall and narrow, especially a stone put in position by people as a monument or for religious reasons. This doesn't work. So then I looked online and I saw not a cryogel monolith, but a crystal monolith. And this looks like a game piece or something, or a decoration for my son's room. This is not what the patent application means, I'm sure. So now I had to do some digging. So what does it say? Okay, the cryogel monoliths are characterized by high porosity and elasticity, polyacrylamide cryogel monolith with a ligand, okay? And then what happened was it went into a thing called definition by reference. And this is a dirty trick that people that write patents play, whereby you can take another complete document and pump the whole contents of it into the patent application, and everything that's in this gets stuck into that. So every definition in this second patent or patent application is baked into this patent application. So that's exactly what they did. They talked about how to make it, and they referenced this patent application. How do you know it's an application? Because it starts with the WO, and the World Patent Office does not grant patents, and it has an A at the end. So it says here, well, we made them the same way that we made them in this patent application. And so then we also can buy them from Protista Biotechnology, okay? So buying them from Protista doesn't tell me what they did to what, and even doesn't tell me what a cryogel monolith is. So then I had to go look at this other patent. So when I got to this other patent, it says, well, you make it by putting the monomers into something, and then you do polycondensation under freezing conditions. So then as this freezes, you get this separation where the solvent crystallizes and the monomers are all stuck together, and by some means that I don't understand, it forms a cryogel. And then you can drain out the solvent. And so we're getting closer. And what did they do? They used another incorporation by reference. So now there's a third one that they've added into the first one. And so now I had to go look at this next one. This is how I felt. Okay, so it says here, the monoliths. Okay, a monolith is produced by controlled polymerization inside a chromatographic column. Okay, they're not pouring beads into a column. They're putting these monomers in, and they're crystallizing and forming a cryogel inside the tube. And here it says, it may be in the form of a monolith encased in a column. And then the manufacturer said the cryogel monoliths are prepared in one-piece columns, and they're poured in there. And I assume that when you go to their website, you have to buy the column too, because you can't buy this sponge-like morphology. And they have large pores, and they're interconnected, and they look like this. Okay, so a cryogel monolith is this polymer that was made in a tube. Now I feel a lot better. So we know what the adsorption-based separation is. We know what the cryogel monolith is. Very much unlike a stone used for religious reasons, if you ask me. And then we wanted to know what physical deformation is. And fortunately, the specification comes to our rescue. It's squeezing. It's squeezing. I was so disappointed. I had expected something really fancy, but no. You have your cryogel monolith, and you pour in your bioparticle solution or suspension, and you let it flow out, and the bioparticles stick on there, and then you put in your eluting medium, and you squeeze. I had expected something elegant. Alas, was not to be. So let's talk about how it all works together, okay? So now we can look at the claim, and we can know what it means. It's a process for adsorption-based separation, which we understand, of bioparticles from an aqueous suspension containing such bioparticles. Okay, the process comprises, so open-ended, bringing the aqueous suspension into contact with our macroporous cryogel monolith that has, of course, a ligand which can interact specifically or non-specifically to the bioparticle. There's a receptor on the surface, and that causes the bioparticle to stick to the monolith. And then you can elute it, you can liberate it by putting in your elution medium and squeezing it, and it all comes out. And now we understand this, to begin with, rather cryptic claim. And you follow this exact same path whenever you're trying to interpret the meaning of a claim. And the reason I chose this one is because I figured it would be a little bit obscure, and that people that would be going to a Fats and Oils Society's webinar would be likely to recognize a lot of terms of the art for a fats and oils patent, but not perhaps this one. So remember, there are 3 types of claims: the composition, method, process, or product by process. There's a preamble, a transitional phase, or list of limitations. Only those, and followed by those are the 3 parts: preamble, transitional phase, and list of limitations. And then you have independent or dependent claims. And that brings us to the end. If there are questions, I will entertain them now.
All right, thank you, Scott. And for anyone on, if you do have any questions, please write those in the questions panel that is located in your GoToMeeting control panel. And you can also use the chat box as well. And so I just want to give everyone a second if they are formulating questions. So as a reminder, and I did put that in the chat box, we have the 3rd webinar in this series next week. And that one is Pitfalls of Patent Ignorance, and that'll be September 15th. And then on September 16th, or I'm sorry, yes, Mindsoft will join us for why are patents important for R&D. And it looks like I do have a question. And the question is, do the dependent claims go through the same process you described, or is it simply an exercise in determining how the independent claim is limited?
Excellent question. The answer is, of course, it depends. Most of the time, a dependent claim will be more clear than what we had come to today. It'll often be a limitation that's just the temperature range or a composition range. It has to have less than this much of something. But if you do come across a term that looks suspicious, or like it may be something that would be possibly interpreted in a way contrary to the normal meaning, then it's a good idea to look at it. But most of the time, if you understand the independent claims, the dependent claims are not bothered with, because the independent claim is the big, broad one that you want to care about. But yeah, if I came across a term in a dependent claim, I would take it through the same exercise. And we've spent 40 minutes doing this now, and you could, if you know what you're doing, you could do a couple patents in that time, if they were of this complexity.
Thank you. Next question is, if writing claims should be open-ended and should be read as open-ended, how do we know the boundaries or limits?
That's another good question. So the way the game is played, the goal of the person who drafts the patent is to make it so that there are no limitations. However, that is, of course, impossible. And so everything in the patent application, in the specification, could serve to limit things. But the real way to find out is to look at the prosecution history. So now the Patent Office, the US Patent and Trademark Office, has a platform called PAIR, which is Patent Application Information Retrieval. And when you look on PAIR, you can search and find the particular case that you're looking at, and you will see a record of correspondence, if the patent's been granted, a record of correspondence between the Patent Office and the patent applicant's attorney. And every statement that the patent applicant's attorney makes in the response to the patent office could possibly be an additional limitation that doesn't show up in the patent body because it's called the prosecution history. Now, a word of warning is you cannot make a legal judgment based on your determination. You cannot make a legal recommendation. It has to come from a patent attorney. It can't come from a patent agent even though in my job, I would do these analyses, and the patent attorneys who worked with me had checked my work enough times that it's like, yeah, this guy gets it right. And so they were very quickly able to confirm that I'd done the job and able to put their stamp of approval on it. I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, and if you do have a follow-up question, I will keep an eye out for that. Please feel free to write that in the questions section should you need further clarification. Is there any advantage to using the definition by reference? Why do patent lawyers do this at all?
Well, it does provide a bunch of ammunition when you are prosecuting the patent before the patent office. In other words, when you're arguing with the patent examiner, the examiner will say, well, you can't have this claim because of this. Or perhaps they might say, you didn't enable it. And so here's a little tip, okay? When it comes to the patent office, the patent examiners don't have time to read a whole beautiful, elegant patent application. They read the claims. And they may glance through the patent application to find something relevant to the claims. But generally speaking, they look at the claims and they go, okay, I have these 50 documents that I rely on all the time, and I can take something from this and something from that and something from that, and I can reject the patent based on that. Okay, so especially an enablement rejection, which isn't that common, but if the patent examiner looks through the patent specification and goes, oh, it's not in here, and makes an enablement rejection, then the patent attorney can say, oh, but I'm sorry, Mr. Examiner, the rejection is actually incorrect because that particular enabling step is described in this patent over here that we've incorporated by reference. And so it's kind of a dirty trick that you can play on the patent office, and then the objection might be overcome and the patent attorneys won that round. And then the examiner has to make another rejection. So it's a way of getting a whole bunch of information into the patent without writing it in.
Are independent claims that follow after claim 1 as important as claim 1 itself? Is there an order of importance?
The order is always supposed to be claim 1 is first. And I would say that 1% of the time, I mean, claim 1 is the most important. The first claim is the most important. And I would say 1% of the time, when you look at claim 1 and you look at a following independent claim, the following independent claim is actually broader. That's very rare. Now, when you file a patent application, you get 3 independent claims and a total of 20 claims for your filing fee. So if you want to have more independent claims, you have to pay a fee for each one. And if you want to have more dependent claims or total claims than 20, you have to pay a fee for each one. And the patent office started this some years ago because people were filing these crazy long claim sets. In Europe, I think it's something like 400 euros if you want to file an additional independent claim. So they're really strict about it.
Thank you. When an independent claim is made invalid for whatever reason, what happens to the claims depending on it? Would they still?
Oh, excellent question. You see, the claims that are dependent are the saviors of the patent application, because the broad claim was rejected because it read on some other patent or some other document or something. But then because you've added a limitation in claim 2, now you've got this narrower claim and you can promote that to claim 1 and the patent office can't reject it anymore because they rejected the first claim, the original first claim, on the areas it impinged on prior art. But now you've got this finer claim which saves your patent application, and it becomes your new claim 1. Now, of course, it's a much smaller claim that you've gained a right to, but still you save the application.
Okay. The next question is there any link for pair? And I think I know what they're looking for, and I think I have it. But Scott, did you have a direct link that you wanted to provide? Otherwise, I can send them what I found.
No, I don't have a link.
Yep, okay, I'll send a little note.
No.
I think. Okay, so the next question then, are companies required to offer the inventor some type of reimbursement for assignment to that company?
No. Now there are, again, the answer is it depends. Okay, if you're in the USA, there's no obligation, or at least there was last time I checked. Some companies will give you a plaque and a silver dollar from the year that your patent application or your patent actually issued, and some will give you $500, and some will give you nothing. Now in Europe, in Germany in particular, they have a very inventor-friendly system whereby if a German inventor is the inventor on a patent and the patent is granted and the company makes money on it, some of that money ends up going to the inventor. Really nice system if you're an inventor. But there's no requirement that you get anything.
And so you're answering the next question, but I'll go ahead and read it just in case you wanted to expand on that. But they're asking, are companies required to offer the inventor some type of reimbursement for assignment to that company?
No, not to my knowledge. In fact, I remember those papers that I've signed, you're signing, let me elaborate. You're signing, when you sign that, you're signing that you will assign these rights without compensation. But there is actually a clause somewhere, I believe it's a statutory clause that that the inventors are entitled to $1. Because I remember I went down to, before this place I worked at, I got this guy's patent allowed, and this was before the company started the process of giving people a silver dollar. I went down and I gave the inventor $1, and he wouldn't take it. He said, "No, I want the company to give it to me. I'm not taking your $1."
That's amazing.
Yeah, people are
Okay,
silly sometimes.
It looks like this is the last question. So if you do have a question or a follow-up, please type that in now. So the question I have now is, if a patent is filed initially, is there a way to track about the status before it is accepted?
Yes. This is, okay, so now the system that the US Patent Office uses is called PAIR. And that's the patent application information retrieval. And it used to be transparent so that if I knew the number, or I could find the number of a patent application, I could observe the correspondence between the patent office and the attorney as it was entered into the electronic database. I read a note, and I haven't confirmed this, but I did read an obscure note that hinted at the fact that that was no longer the case, but I can't verify it. So if I wanted to follow some aspect of it, I would use some sort of patent information tool like the Mindsoft tool that they're going to talk about on the 16th. The Mindsoft makes some very powerful tools, and they have them available. There are also free tools that you can use. The Patent Lens is one of them. And you would interface with that, and you'd have to go through the tutorial, but that will give you information about the status of the patents, I don't believe would be able to see the correspondence as you used to be able to see in pair. Not really satisfied with the answer, but it's the best I have.
Okay. And we did just have another question come in. At least a month ago, you could still go into public pair and see the file wrapper.
Oh, okay. Thank you. And you see, I
And then
haven't.
John Graham is letting us know. Thank you for that.
Who is that?
John Graham.
Thanks, John.
Absolutely. Okay, well, so it looks like that was the last question or comment. Thank you all for great questions and great discussion. I do hope you can join us next week for the next two patent-related webinars so we can continue the discussions and learning there. Thank you, Scott, so much for your time with us discussing patents.
Thanks, Amy.
All right, have a great day, everyone.
Bye-bye.